Hello, dear colleagues around the globe. Hélène Monnier-Lemna here, born and raised in Dijon, France. I spent my entire teaching career of 29 years in Plymouth County, California, a rural mountain community nestled in the Sierras. This last year, I've been the art specialist for Quincy Elementary School. I love outdoor adventures, arts field experiences, and integrating the arts in the core curriculum. If you're looking for a fresh way to capture your students' attention, you are in the right place. In this session, I will show you a simple strategy that will bring geometry to life and boost your students' appreciation for the arts. My own principal requested that I try to infuse some geometry in my visual art classes to help students hone their skills and improve their test scores. Shh. The strategy I have chosen to use can be transferred to other subjects as well. I will give you resources to do that. It's an entry-level, user-friendly strategy that just requires being able to project a work of art on your teaching screen. No fancy supplies to distribute to students, no messes to clean up. You don't even need to discuss the artist or the context of the piece, though it could be a great extension activity. I will show you how to use abstract art as math text to help you students identify different types of triangles, angles, and lines in a work of art as they learn key elements of art and principles of design affecting the composition of that work. I encourage you to download the handout that accompanies this lesson now. For this session, we will focus on Kandinsky's Composition 8. This strategy combines National Art Anchor Standard 8, which is responding to the art by perceiving and analyzing artistic work, and the National Math Standards for Elementary Geometry, which includes identifying lines and angles and classifying shapes according to the properties of their lines and angles. When it comes to analyzing the composition of a work of visual art, there are many components to consider. In my handout, I have included the links to a couple helpful videos to watch about the elements of art and the principles of design. Understanding those terms will be most helpful for students to analyze any work of art. I suggest that as a starting point, you focus on three key elements of art: line, shape, and color. In time, teach your students about form, space, texture, and value, and add those terms to the discussion. As a start, teach them also three key principles of design: emphasis, pattern, and movement. When they're ready, teach them also about proportion, balance, unity, rhythm, and variety. This is not an exhaustive list, but it is comprehensive enough for elementary students. Once they become familiar with those key terms, their ability to analyze works of art will really expand. Those terms are also included in my handout. Students will need some prior knowledge in geometry, all the basic lines, angles, triangles, and common polygons. In using this strategy, I have noticed that it is quite essential with elementary students to connect with a piece first. So I just asked them a very general question: what is going on with this artwork? And it certainly triggers their imagination. Abstract art for most students is very unfamiliar, so they need to not just look at the shape, but what's behind all this, according to them. So I like to use the language I notice, I wonder. This reminds me of that. They at Arnold campus, they're very familiar with the wording because they use it for science journaling all the time. And you will be entertained because they come up with all kinds of things I had never even imagined looking at this rather well-known piece. So there is a black hole spilling out all those shapes. There is a triangular monster in the middle with white eyes that are being poked by needles. And they kind of have to get that a bit out of their system before they can do the more technical work of analyzing the piece using domain-specific language. I have provided some sentence stems for the students to respond to each principle of design. And for emphasis, my eyes are drawn to blank because of blank. So it could be my eyes are drawn to the scalene triangles in the middle of the piece because it is darker and it has a white circle in the middle. So it's very prominent. For pattern, I see a pattern of lines, shapes, or colors in this or that part of the piece. And honestly, that's really tricky for students to be able to be specific about what are they talking about on the piece. Is it bottom right, middle, top left? It's good training for them. So for instance, I see a pattern of white semicircles sitting on a horizontal line near the middle. For movement, I see lines, shapes, colors guiding my eyes in this or that direction. So in this case, it could be I see all those lines converging to the top right corner of the piece and the rainbow colors that get more and more intense toward that top right. So it creates a direction, a movement from bottom left to top right. And then one last question, which is more to, again, connect with the piece emotionally. What is the mood of this piece? And that is very subjective. You will see some videos, some responses that go very opposite direction in terms of what the students think the mood is. But they could be fancy. All those elements create this and that mood. Or when I look at this piece, I feel happy, puzzled, etc. If you have a smart board, students can come up and circle the lines or shapes as they talk about them. If you don't, like me, in my art room, I just have vintage technology, they can point to them on the screen with a pointer. You can also make copies of the work of art, slip them in protective sleeves, and have your students mark on their copies with an expo pen as they respond to the work. And by having copies, they can also work in small groups to respond, which they really enjoy. In my handout, I do have a link to a printable version of Composition 8. Students are going to share some of their sample responses to the principles of design as well as mood, and then just a general reflection of what a student got out of the technique. So you will notice that even though I have taught them those sentence stems, it takes them time to really embrace them for their own responses. They tend to go to a more simple language, and we need to be patient with them.
The pictures behind me catch my eye because of the circles. It just looks like they glow.
Because some of them have the same patterns and they also are the same details and they're all the same.
From the bottom to the top, it gets easier for me to see all the lines and colors going that way.
I think this piece is a playful mood because it looks like I jump from shape to shape to shape to shape to shape. So playful mood is kind of like is a stressed out mood because there's all this stuff like your mind is full and you're jumping from one thing to another.
This piece helps me look at other shapes like water bottles and windows and stuff like that.
As Mason just shared, there is something very powerful about analyzing abstract art, looking for all those geometric elements, and then looking around and starting to see them, or noticing, like some of my students would tell me, oh, the Eiffel Tower, that's an isosceles triangle. And oh, look at this window, that's just, it has all those parallel lines. And that certainly will also help them with their drawing. Okay, so now it's time to take some action. Pause the video. On a post-it, please write down one actionable step you can start implementing in your classroom by next week and stick it on your teaching board. All the resources you need are in my handout. First, a step-by-step, so building background knowledge with geometry, teaching all the types of line, angles, triangles, the basic polygons. Responding to art, teaching them the elements of art, focusing first on line, shape, and color. For the principles of design, focusing first on emphasis, pattern, and movement. And then step 2, giving students time to connect time with a piece by giving them just time to look at it silently. And then answering general questions like what is going on in this artwork. Step 3, teach students to respond to art using geometry terms. And of course, the challenge is to guide them to use domain-specific terms to respond to the principles of emphasis, pattern, and movement. It's a good thing to continue by guiding the students through a discussion about the mood of the piece and even reflecting on what this process has done for them. That will help them connect with the whole experience. My additional resources are 2 wonderful video, 6-minute each, produced by the same woman about the elements of art and the principles of design. A very clever 4-minute video on the types of angles that is very entertaining. The last video is really for an adult audience, and you will probably just want for you students to see 2 minutes of it from minute 125 to 318, which has a great discussion on triangular composition and repeated lines. And then you also have the printable copy of Kandinsky Composition 8. Again, Hélène Monnier-Lemna here, art specialist at Quincy Elementary in Northern California. I sure hope that you will use this simple strategy using art as math text, whether it's Kandinsky's work or other abstract artists, or any work of art, really. Remember that you can expand it by bringing any representational art that is connected to whether you social study, you science, you language art, and look for compositional shapes that are in that piece. So I look forward to your questions, comments. Hopefully, if you can think of other resources connected to my presentation, send them to me. I would love to see them. I look forward to hearing from you and enjoy the rest of the summit.